Hello and great to see you all to this week's Oxygen XML Live webinar. My name is Alim Belu and I will be your host for today's live event, working with DITA in Oxygen, customizing the editing experience. As you might be familiar with the Working with DITA in Oxygen series, this fourth installment brings back Sorin Carbunaru, senior software developer at Syncrosoft, the company that produces the Oxygen XML suite of products. And under his guidance, you will explore several ways of customizing the data editing experience according to your specific needs. So buckle up because a lot of topics will be covered today. Now, before Sorin will start his presentation, let me give you some useful information about today's webinar. As always, all of our events are being recorded, so today's event makes no difference. After the webinar comes to an end, the recording will be made available on the event page on our site, oxygenxml.com, along with the slides and samples of Sorin's presentation, and also the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel titled Oxygen XML. Another important aspect is that as we go along, we encourage you to ask us questions by using the questions panel from the GoToWebinar interface, where Radu Koravu, project manager at Syncrosoft, will assist us by answering your questions in real time. So, without further ado, let me welcome Sorin Carbunaru. Hi, Sorin.
Hi, Alin. Hello, everyone. Sorin here. I'm glad to be live again for a new event, a new webinar, and I really hope that you will greatly benefit from my presentation today. As promised in the webinar's description, today we're going to cover the author mode actions customization, the author mode rendering customization, as well as how to customize the document validation, the content completion assistant, and the new document templates. All right, so let's get started with our first topic and talk about how to customize the author mode actions. You should know that an author mode action is built upon one or more author mode operations. And when an action is performed, what happens actually is that a specific operation is activated and run based on the context where you invoke the action. As you will see, Oxygen provides a really impressive list of built-in operations, but it also allows you to add some custom ones. And you can manage your actions either from the graphical user interface or by using some dedicated XML files. And I'm going to show you both ways. Okay, so it's already time to switch to Oxygen. But before proceeding with creating our author action, we will need to extend the built-in data framework. We want to separate our customizations from the main data framework. And in order to do that, I'm going to my Oxygen installation folder, and I'm going to create a custom frameworks subfolder here, and another folder inside it. Let's call it DITA for webinar. And now we're going to open the preferences dialog box. And here under document type association, we have this locations subpage where we need to add our custom frameworks folder as an additional frameworks directory. Let's get to our folder. And by doing this, we instruct Oxygen to load frameworks from this custom frameworks directory. Let's apply the changes. And now we can extend the default data framework by selecting it and using this extend action. Let's give it a name. I'm going to set it to the highest priority and save it inside the custom frameworks DITA for webinar folder. So here we save our framework file. Let's apply the changes. And now we can edit our extension. We can simply double click. And here you can see this author tab and this actions subtab. Let me make this dialog box a bit bigger. As you can see, the actions that come from the built-in framework are many in number. And for creating a new one, we will use this plus sign from here. What I'm going to do is to create another action that will insert a hazard statement element. This element is used in DITA to describe some hazards and how to avoid them. And I want to insert a specific structure that contains an extra child than the structure that gets inserted by default when using the content completion assistant. I have this structure saved here in a helpful file. And let's start by providing an ID for our action. Let's say insert hazard statement. We can also provide a description and a name. And now we can also provide icons for our action. I'm going to load the icons from the base framework. So the first one is the bigger icon. And then the second one is the smaller one. And we can also provide a shortcut key combination. I'm simply pressing the keys right now. So let's say Control Shift H, H from hazard statement. And here at the bottom, we have the section where we configure the operations. For our action, I'm going to use only one operation. And that operation is called insert fragment. So as I mentioned earlier, we have an impressive list of operations, but I'm interested in this one, the insert fragment operation. And the fragment that I want to insert is the one that I copied earlier. I'm using the default values for the rest of the arguments, so I'm going to insert this fragment at the current location as the first child of the current element in a schema-aware manner, and so on. And one more thing that I want to do is to provide an activation XPath. This expression is used to enable or disable the action based on the context. And what I want to do is to make sure that my hazard statement element is allowed as a child of the current element. And for doing this, I'm going to use the oxy allows child element XPath function with the following arguments. So I'm using the star as an element name. So this means I'm going to accept any element name, but the element must have a class value that contains the following particle: hazard minus d slash hazard statement. And now our action is ready. We can press OK, and our action has been created. And now let's add the action in various places. For example, we can add it in the DITA main menu. Let me sort this table so I can spot my action faster. And I want to insert my action here after the insert note action, like this. In a pretty much identical way, we can insert the action also in the contextual menu. and we can also insert it in the toolbar. And I'm going to insert it after the insert paragraph action. I'm going to leave the content completion configuration for later, but for now, let's apply our changes and let's open a DITA topic. Now we can see that we have this action on the toolbar, which inserts our hazard statement element. And we know that is our this is our structure because it has this hazard symbol child. The action is also available in the contextual menu here, as well as in the DITA main menu right here. But now let's say that I want to make some changes in my action, and I want to make a small change and test it in my topic, and then perhaps make another small change and again test it. And for doing this, I would have to go back to the preferences dialog box and edit my framework and go to the actions sub tab and show this edit dialog, which is a bit tedious, right? In order to avoid this tedious task, what we can do is to export this action as an XML file. And when we do this, Oxygen automatically creates this external author actions folder. And let's apply the changes. And now our action is exported in a file. We can see this this icon gives us this hint. And now we can open that XML file in the editor. And we can make some small change. Let's say add 3 dots at the end of the description. Now if we open the topic again and go to our action, we can see that the description has changed. So this is faster. We can go to our XML file where we have our author action defined, make some changes, and go back to our topic and see the changes. We can also create another action from scratch using such an XML file. The new document wizard has this author action template, which we can use. And here we have some explanations about how we can use this file. Okay, so let's move on and let's now talk about how to customize the author mode rendering. Well, the author mode rendering in Oxygen is based on CSS. And the author mode rendering, for the author mode rendering, Oxygen uses one base style for the default rendering, but then we can also apply a set of alternate styles if we want to. And by using Oxygen's custom CSS functions, we can also create some in-place actions that can be added and used directly from the author page. And we're going to see how in just a few minutes. Now let's switch back to Oxygen. And for today's presentation, I thought about 3 use cases for customizing the styles. The first one, let's say that we want to apply a change that will affect all the styles, all the main styles. Speaking of the styles, they are available here in the toolbar under the styles menu. And the top section presents the main styles, and the bottom section, the alternate styles. So for example, we can choose only one style from the top section, let's say the trip journal style, but then we can select multiple alternate styles like hints, which presents these hints inside the document, or some inline actions that can be used to create new elements. Okay, and I said that the first use case is to customize all the styles. So for example, let's say we want to center all the titles for all these main styles. In order to do that, we first need to find out how the current styles are written. And for that, I want to use this inspect styles action from the contextual menu, which presents the CSS inspector. And here I find this CSS rule, which applies to topic titles, and it looks very promising. So I'm going to copy it and use it in a new CSS file. Let's create a new CSS file inside our DITA extension. I'm creating a new folder for my CSS files, and let's call it centered titles. Okay, let's save the file and now paste the rule that I copied earlier. I'm not interested in the previous properties, but what I want to do is to use the, text align property with the center value. And now we have to instruct our DITA extension to use this CSS file. So we have to go back to our DITA extension, edit it, and here we have this CSS tab where we can add our new CSS file. We don't need to provide any title or check the alternate text. We'll leave them as they are. And now if we apply the changes and open our topic again, we can see that the title is indeed centered. And if we switch the style, the title is still centered. Let me deactivate the alternate styles to have a cleaner look of the author mode. Okay, so this was the first scenario when you need to perform a change that applies to all the styles. But let's say that perhaps you want to edit only one main style. Let's say that for the trip journal style, you want to change the font of the body to be the same as the font of the title. For this, we need a new CSS file. Let's call it custom trip journal. And again, we need to see where the font comes from. And we can find it here. So this is the font of the root and to all the elements except this title, which has a specific rule with a specific font. And we can go to the CSS file responsible for the trip journal style by clicking this link from here, stylejournal.css. So here we find these rules that define these two font families. I will copy these from here and paste them in our custom trip journal. And what I want to do is to apply this font from here globally, starting from the root, and this style will cascade to all the children. But I also want to keep the styles from the trip journal CSS file. And for this, I'm using the import statement. And because I'm here in this CSS folder and I have to go upwards 3 levels, I'm going to write this, and then we need to go inside the frameworks folder, the DITA framework, the CSS subfolder for editing, and the name of the CSS file is style-journal. All right, now let's add this as a main style. Select the CSS file, let's provide a title. And now we can choose the custom trip journal from the styles menu. And as you can see now, the font of the body is the same as the font of the title. So this was the second scenario. And I have a third one. Let's say that we want to create an alternate style, which when enabled, it presents an action that allows us to choose a symbol for the hazard symbol element. Therefore, we need a third CSS file. Let's call it symbol href. And I have the CSS rule right here because it's bigger and it would take some time to write it. And let's try to read it. Let's try to translate it. So after the hazard symbol element, we will create a button by using the Oxy button custom CSS function from Oxygen. And this button will perform the action defined here. This action is built upon the change attribute operation. And the attribute that will be added or changed is href. And we will take the value from for the href attribute from the user by using this ask editor variable. This will show an input dialog where the user can provide the URL for the symbol. Let's instruct our extension to use this CSS. So we're selecting the CSS file. Let's provide a title. And we're going to add this as an alternate style, as I said earlier. Okay, and now if we apply this style, you see that we get this action here, which can be used to browse and select a symbol, an icon, from the DITA framework, from the images. And now we have our symbol here, and we can deselect this alternate style. So these were the three use cases that I thought might be interesting. Sorry. All right, let's move to our third topic and discuss about the document validation customization. The built-in DITA framework has a default validation scenario. And this scenario contains a list of what we call validation units. And each validation unit uses a specific schema for validating the document, the current document. We can customize the DITA validation either by creating a new validation scenario or by adding new validation units to the default one. And we're going to use this second approach and edit the current validation scenario. Let me close all of these. And for customizing our document validation system, I'm going to use Schematron. Schematron is a validation language which is based on rules. It is a powerful tool, and although I'm a beginner user of Schematron, I know that you can use it in ways that you cannot use other schemas. So it's a very powerful tool that can be used for validating your document structure. Okay, let me copy this file from here inside our DITA extension, and let's create a resources folder here. Paste the file, and now let's take a look at our Schematron file. Let's try to read it. So in this Schematron file, we defined a rule that will be applied on data topics. So the context of the rule is the root element that has this topic particle inside its class attribute as the value, or inside the value of the class attribute. And when this rule is activated, we want to test that the ID detected inside the document is equal to the file name. And in order to do that, we define this required ID variable, and we compute its value starting from the document URL. We take the file name and we drop the extension. And then we perform this test. We test that the detected ID is equal to the required ID. Let's go back to our DITA extension, and here under the validation tab, let's edit this DITA transfer validation scenario. I'm adding a new validation unit for XML documents, and I'm using this button from here to select our custom schema, the Schematron file. And now that we have instructed our framework to use the Schematron file, we can open a document, and here we see that we have an error, and the error says that the topic ID must be equal to the file name. So this description is taken from here, from the assert element from the Schematron file. Now, there is another layer that can be added on top of Schematron, and this layer is called Schematron Quick Fixes. And you can use this, as the name suggests, to create some fixes that can be quickly applied from your topic. For example, I have this quick fix here. This fix has an ID and a description, and it also has an action that will be performed when applying this fix. And what this action does is to add the value of the required ID variable as the value of the ID attribute. And for using this quick fix, we need to set the SQF fix attribute and provide the ID of the defined fix. And now if we reload our topic, when hovering over the error, we get this small widget here with the quick fix. And we also have this light bulb here. And if we apply this fix, we can see that the error disappears because now the ID is the same as the file name. So this is how you can customize the validation of your documents by using Schematron and Schematron quick fixes. Okay, let's go back to our slides. And now let's discuss about how to customize the content completion assistant. You should know that Oxygen gathers the information necessary to determine the proposals that will be displayed in the content completion assistant from the schemas. And we have two possibilities to configure the default proposals. The first one from the graphical user interface by editing our framework, but this only applies to the content completion window showed in the author mode. And the second option is to use a configuration file, which will affect both the text mode and the author mode. And let's see both of them in action. Okay, the first one, as mentioned, is by using can be done by using the graphical user interface. So we're going back to the author tab, and here in the content completion sub-tab. For our presentation, what we'll do is to filter out the default hazard statement element from the content completion window and replace it with the action that we defined earlier. And for doing this, I'm going to add the hazard statement element here in this filter to remove this item. So let's remove the hazard statement element from the content completion window. And now we're going to add the insert hazard statement action in the content completion for the author mode. And let's give it a name, hazard statement. And now if we show the content completion assistant for the author mode and look for hazard, we don't get the hazard statement element anymore, which would have had this blue disk. Instead, we get our hazard statement action. And we know this because it has this icon and the description that we set earlier. And we see that we indeed use our action because we have the hazard symbol child here. So this is how you can customize the content completion for the author mode using the graphical user interface. Now let's talk about the second option and how to use a configuration file. First, let's take a look at the configuration file that is already defined for the default for the base DITA framework. Before going through these examples, what I want to do is to mention when these elements can be used. So whenever we want to customize the values of an attribute or of an element, we need to use this match element in the configuration file. If we want to customize the available attributes for an element or the available child elements of an element, then we use the element proposals element. And if we want to customize the rendering, then we would use the element renderings element. And now let's take a look at these examples. As I said, the match element is used whenever you want to customize attribute values and element values. And in this first example, we customize the values of the type attribute for any element. And we provide a set of possible values, but only if the schema doesn't provide other values. This is what this add if empty value for the action attribute means. We will use these values only if the schema doesn't provide other values. And we can see this customization in action if we open this map from here and try to set the type attribute. And here we have the values defined in the content completion configuration file. Okay. By the way, you can also build this items structure by using an XSLT script if you want to, and perhaps you can do some very fancy things by doing this. The second example, in the second example, we customize the type attribute, but only for the audience element. So this is a more specific customization. And again, we provide a set of values only if the schema doesn't provide other values. And if we want to customize the values, the text values for an element, then we would use this match element with the element name attribute. As mentioned earlier, we use the element proposals element if we want to customize the available attributes for an element or the child elements of an element. And in this example, we insert a title and a paragraph as the children of a section. Here in this path attribute, we specify the element that we want to customize. And as you can see in the tooltip message, you can use some simple XPath-like expressions. And then you can use several attributes for customizing the values. So you can use, you can insert elements, you can insert attributes whenever you insert a section, or you can set some possible values for the attribute names and the element names, or you can reject attributes or elements. By the way, at the end of my presentation, I have a slide with some useful links where you can go and read some more about customizing the content completion assistant and also about the other customizations. So that would be a very good idea to go and read some more because we cannot cover everything in this webinar. And getting back to our examples, here at the bottom, we have this element renderings element, which is used to render a paragraph, a P element in a different way. We can provide a specific value here, or as in this example, we can use a translation file and make use of this editor variable for translating, for getting the translation for a specific key. And now if we go back to our DITA topic, you can see that because I haven't reloaded my topic, we have the P element here as well as here in the breadcrumb. But if we reload this to apply the changes from the content completion configuration file, you can see that the paragraph, the P element has changed into paragraph. So this is only a rendition change, as well as here in the breadcrumb. And also if we insert a new paragraph, we have this placeholder again with the paragraph text. Okay, so now let's create a new content completion configuration file for our DITA extension. I'm going to use a content completion configuration template from the new document wizard. I'm going to save this inside the resources folder, and we need to provide a very specific name. What I want to do is to apply my new customization on top of the customizations that come from the base framework. And for this, I need to name my file like this, ccconfig my underscore ext from extension. Okay. And as you can see, the template has quite a lot of examples here. I'm going to remove all of them. And for our demonstration, I want to customize the values of the type of hazard element. So right now, if I press Control space, and believe me, I'm pressing the keys, I don't get any proposals. But this will going to change if we're using the match element to customize the type of hazard element. And again, we're going to use our values only if the schema doesn't provide other values. And let's say the first type of hazard would be fire, and the second one would be electric shock. Again, we have to instruct our DITA extension to use this configuration file, and we have to add its parent folder, that is the resources folder, here for the class path in the class path list, and I'm going to add it as the first item to make sure it gets loaded. Okay, and now if we're opening, let's say I have this removing the battery topic, let's say. Here we could say that we can insert this, and we could say that a type of hazard, if we are not very careful with the battery and we pierce it, we could have a small fire. And now we can see that the values for the type of hazard element come from the content completion configuration file that we have defined. Okay, we have one last topic in our presentation, and that is how to customize the new document templates. In Oxygen, when we create DITA resources, we usually create them by using the predefined templates. And Oxygen allows us to create custom templates or to customize the existing ones. And what I want to do for the purpose of our demonstration is to go to the base framework and copy a template from here. Let's copy this topic template along with its properties file. Go back to our DITA extension, and here create a templates folder. Let's paste the files that we copied, and now let's open them in Oxygen. Okay, so what we can do is, first of all, to customize the content of the template. For example, let's say we want to also insert a short description whenever we create a topic. And here we can also use editor variables to, for example, ask the user to provide a short description. So please provide a short description. And the type of the ask variable. And we can also set or add some placeholders by using the oxy placeholder processing instruction. And we provide the value of the placeholder here in the content attribute. Please don't leave me empty. So this is one way of customizing a template by editing the content of the template. But we can also customize the template by using its properties file, a configuration file, which should have the same name as the template. And here we have a set of attributes, a set of properties that can be used. For example, we can customize the display name, let's say custom topic, and we can customize the icons. For example, the small icon is used here in the new document wizard for these icons here. But these paths are broken right now, so I'm not going to fix them at the moment. I'm keeping the DITA type so that I can use this template in the DITA Master Manager as well. We're keeping the popular value for the tags property, so we can have our template here in the popular section. This description, again, it has a broken path, but this description is used when you hover over a template and you get this description here, this tooltip. But for the sake of being faster, I'm going to remove this. And instead, I'm going to use the file name prefix property with this t_value. And this value will be used whenever we propose a name for the file to be created. We have to instruct our framework again to use these templates. So we're adding the templates folder here. Again, let's add it as the first one. And now if we try to create a new file, we can see that here in the popular section, we have our template. And we have our prefix here. And even if we change the title, the prefix is still there. And now if we hit create, we get this input dialog box because of the Ask Editor variable that we used inside the template. So we can create, we can provide a short description. And we see the short description has been added here, and we also have this placeholder that we added just a few minutes ago. Okay, and with this, my demonstration here is done. As mentioned, I have this link with this slide with useful links here. And if you follow these links, please make sure to also take a look at the related topics. It's a lot of helpful and very interesting information in the related topics as well. All right, so thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your patience. And now it's time for our Q&A section. So Radu, can you please help us with this one?
Hello everyone. Sorin, thanks for this nice overview of our framework extension functionality. I see that there are 4 questions. The first one is about why you created a custom framework in the Oxygen installation folder. And because in a way, it's not a good place. Sometimes you may update Oxygen or the entire folder may get deleted and your custom framework may be deleted accidentally. And my answer for this is that you can create the custom framework anywhere. I usually create it on my desktop or in my documents folder. So it doesn't need to be in the Oxygen installation folder. Also, I'm using a Mac, and sometimes on Mac I throw the entire Oxygen installation to the trash folder, and this would mean that I would destroy my customization. Another question is, can I provide this on a per project basis? And the answer is yes. In a project, you can save a custom framework and save a couple of pages as project level, and then your project will contain both your XML content and the custom framework. So once the project is loaded, you will get validation for those XML documents using your Schematron and the custom CSS, the actions that Sorin showed you, and so on. Question from Bill is in the type hazard example for content completion, do those control space options only appear in text view, or does it also work in author view? And so what Sorin did was he added values for an element in the content completion configuration. And from what I remember, if we switch to the author mode and press enter inside that element, it should present those values there. If it doesn't, we would need to fix them, but it works like that. So besides presenting the other inline elements, it shows the values that Sorin has configured. Another question from Jonathan: is it possible to customize the DITA floating toolbar? And it is, and this is done with CSS. The DITA floating toolbar using a CSS selector, and you can find in the manual help about how to overwrite that selector and to add your own actions or to remove the default actions that we add. A question from Mark. How similar is this process for WebAuthor? And do we create custom framework folder and the subfolders you showed in the same way as for the Oxygen editor on the desktop? And from what I saw, everything that Sorin did today can be ported automatically to the WebAuthor. So people who customize the framework on WebAuthor, they usually start with a standalone desktop version of Oxygen, customize the framework there, add the CSS, Schematron, and so on. And once they have the custom framework directory, they upload it to the WebAuthor server. Most of the times it will work without changes, unless you're using some very complex user interface. Maybe you want to show a dialog to the end user, and that means that on the WebAuthor, the dialog needs to be implemented in JavaScript. Another question from Mark: can custom validation sets in Schematron be unique for different departments while still having one common validation set for all departments' use? I think if you want to have multiple rules for multiple departments, you need to create two framework configurations, and you need to somehow change between these framework configurations when certain end users log into the WebAuthor, because I think the problem, the question is mostly about the WebAuthor, and I'm not sure if that can be done. I think my colleagues who work on the WebAuthor side can give you some hints. I think that based on the user configuration, you may be able to match a certain framework for the current edited XML document. So have two frameworks, one for each department, and have the WebAuthor switch between these automatically, depending on the user who has logged in. And I think this has been done for clients in the past. And another question from Balaji. In content completion configuration, I need note with P as default element. It should allow all elements. How do I achieve? So, from what I remember, I think you can add a required element to the note element, so that when a note is inserted, the paragraph is inserted with it. And yeah, exactly. So Balaji says when a user inserts a note, I want to insert a P tag inside the note element.
Okay, then we would use the element proposals element, and the path would be a note, and then the inserted element would be P from paragraph. Oh, sorry. So now if we go here and reload this, insert a note, we have our paragraph inside.
Thanks, Sorin. So without any need to create a new action, you can use the content completion configuration to force the paragraph inside the note, or you can create a new action to insert the note completely as you want it, maybe add more attributes to it or some content, and create an action for note and mount it on the content completion window or in the main menus. And the last remark is from John. Thanks, Sorin and Radu, for a great presentation. Thanks, John. Thanks for
You're very
attending it. If you have any other questions or uncertainties about certain things that Sorin did, you can get back to us afterwards. Drop us an email, and Sorin or I will answer, and we'll try to help as much as possible, as usual, I think. Back to you, Sorin.
Okay, and now back to Alin.
Thank you, Sorin. Thank you, Serene, for another presentation where you provided us with loads of great information, and of course, Radu, for answering our audience's questions in real time. Regarding how you can contact us, we also remind you that on the page of the event, you have the Oxygen feedback commenting platform, where you can ask us questions, or you can leave questions after the recording of this event will be posted on our site, along with the sample files and slides. And yeah, let me get back to my slides, because I want us to take a look at the remaining scheduled event for April. Creating frameworks using an extension script, a webinar that will be presented by Alex Gitiano on April 21st, next week. So, during this event, we will take an extensive look at a specific method where a framework can be created using a special XML descriptor file, either from scratch or by extending an existing built-in framework, such as DITA or DocBook, and then making modifications to it. Also, we encourage you to take a look at our events page, where you can also find the links to register for free to all of our future events, or to events where our Oxygen team will be present. So, reaching the end of our event, let me thank Sorin again for taking his time in teaching us how to better customize our tools to better fit our specific needs and preferences. So thank you, Sorin.
You're
And
welcome.
also big thank you to Radu Koravu for answering your questions. And of course, a big thank you to everyone that was present today, and for joining us week by week. And until next time, stay safe and have a nice day or evening. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Bye.